In this video, I'm going to show you how to fill out your entire unit circle. So we know a lot already, but we're going to add to it. Let's go ahead and put what we know already. We know this is 0 degrees, and we know this is 90 degrees, 180, 270, and then if we go all the way back around to 0, we're at 360. And we know that these have ordered pairs. So if this has a radius of 1, since it's a unit circle, radius of 1 unit, then this would be over 1 up 0. This point would be over 0 up 1. This point is left 1 up 0. And then this bottom point is over 0 down 1. And those are the things we know about our unit circle already. What we're going to do is then change these into radians. So 0 is 0 radians. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking the degree and I'm multiplying it by pi over 180 to get the radian measure. So 0 times anything is going to be 0. Then if I do 360 times pi over 180, 360 divided by 180 is 2. So this will be 2 pi for 360. Then you can just kind of think about it. You don't have to convert each one. If 2 pi is all the way around, then half of your circle would just be 1 pi. So 180 is the same thing as pi radians. If this semicircle is pi, then half of it, a quarter of the whole circle, would only be half of that pi. So half of your semicircle is just going to be half of that pi. So 1/2 pi, or we write that as pi over 2 for 90. Pi over 2 for your 90. So that tells me that each 90 degrees is pi over 2 radians. So that's 1 pi over 2. This is 2 pi over 2. And 2 over 2 makes a 1 pi. So then another pi over 2, this is 3 pi over 2. If I go again, 4 pi over 2, another 90 degrees. 4 over 2 makes the 2 for the 2 pi. So then we're going to go through and put all of the other degrees that we know. So we know from our special triangles that we've got 30s, 45s, and 60s. So this first line, that's going to be a 30-degree angle. The second one's going to be your 45, and the third one is going to be your 60. And then those are your reference angles for each quadrant. So if I want this line here, that is 30 degrees away from 180. So if I subtract 30 degrees, I'm going to get 150. This line is 45 degrees away from 180. So if you subtract 45, you get 135. This line is 60 degrees away from 180. So if you subtract from 180, you get 120. So those are the degrees in quadrant 2. Then we subtracted those. Now we can add those to get the degrees in quadrant 3. So if I add 30 to 180, I get 210. If I add 45, I get 225. And if I add 60, I get 240. If I add 90, I get the 270. Then quadrant 4, you want to take your reference angles from 360. So if I subtract 30, I get 330. If I subtract 45, I get 315. If I subtract 60, I get 300. So those are all the degrees. Then we're going to go through and do the radians. Now, if you want, you could take every single degree, multiply it by pi over 180 to convert it into radians. Let's do that with 30. If I put 30 in there, 30 times pi over 180, reduce your 30 and your 180, and you're going to get 6. So that's pi over 6. 30 degrees is pi over 6. 45. If you plug that in, you're going to get pi over 4. If you plug 60 into this conversion, you get pi over 3. Now I'm going to use those to get the rest. So this section right here is pi over 6 units. So 30 degrees is pi over 6 units. If I go another 30 degrees, I'm just going to add pi over 6 again. So that's 1 pi over 6. This one should be 2 pi over 6. and 2 over 6 reduces to 1/3, which is why we have pi over 3. If I go another 30 degrees, so 60 plus 30 is 90, then I'm going to have, that was 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, and 3 over 6 makes 1/2, which is what we have. If I go another 30 degrees, then I've got 4 pi over 6. And 4 over 6 reduces to 2/3, so 2 pi over 3. If I go another 30 degrees, then I'm at 5 pi over 6. 5 pi over 6 is your 150. If I go another 30 degrees, then I'm at 6 pi over 6, and the 6 over 6 reduces to pi. If I go another 30 degrees, I'm at 7 pi over 6 for 210. If I go another 30, I'm at 8 pi over 6, which reduces to 4 pi over 3 for 240. Then if I go another 30, I'm at 9 pi over 6, and 9 over 6 reduces to 3/2. Then if you go another 30, you're at 10 pi over 6, which reduces to 5 pi over 3 for 300. Then if you go another 30, you're at 11 pi over 6. That's for 330. And then if you go another 30, then you're at 12 over 6, and 12 over 6 makes the 2, so for 2 pi. Now we can do the same thing with our 45s. So if the first 45 is, where should I go? If the first 45 is pi over 4, and if I go another 45 degrees, 45 plus 45 is 90. So that'll be 2 pi over 4, and 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. If I add 45 again, 90 plus 45 is 135. So that would be 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. If we add 45 again, it'll be 4 pi over 4, and the 4's make pi. If we add 45 again, you're at 5 pi over 4. If you add it again, you're at 270, which is 6 over 4, which reduces to 3 over 2. Add it again, you're at 7 pi over 4. And last time you add it, you're going to get 8 pi over 4, and 8 over 4 makes 2 pi. So those are all your radians filled out. Then we're going to go through and put in all of our ordered pairs. So if you remember your triangles, we will use them to find our sines and cosines. So we've got our 30, 60, 90, which is 1, 2, radical 3. Then we've got our 45, 45, 90, which is 1, 1, radical 2. And each ordered pair has a cosine for the x and a sine for the y. So cosine of 30 degrees is adjacent radical 3 over hypotenuse 2. The sine of 30 degrees is opposite 1 over hypotenuse 2. We go to 45. The sine of 45 is opposite 1 over hypotenuse 2. So radical 2 over 2. I said sine. That should have been my second one. Cosine is 1 over radical 2 as well for adjacent over hypotenuse. So radical 2 over 2. So those are the same. For 60, your cosine of 60 is 1/2. Your sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2. Now, if you know quadrant 1, then those repeat throughout the entire circle. So every 30-degree reference angle, so that'd be 150, 210, and 330, all have the same ordered pair as 30 degrees. So that means at 150, we can put radical 3 over 2, 1/2. At 7 pi over 6, we can put radical 3 over 2, 1/2. And at same thing at 11 pi over 6. Then do your 45s. Everything that has a 5 on it, so 135, 225, 315, they all get rad 2 over 2, rad 2 over 2. So that is your 135. That is your 225. That is your 315. Then you go through and do all your 60s. So that would be everything that's left. 120 gets the same thing as 60. 240 gets the same thing as 60. And 300 gets the same thing. And the very last thing to do is to put in negatives. So remember, all are positive in quadrant 1. Sine is positive in quadrant 2. Cosine or tangent is positive in quadrant 3. And cosine is positive in quadrant 4. So that tells you what's positive. So everything's positive. Here, sine is positive. So that means all the cosines get negatives on them. Then tangent is positive. So that means all of these are sines and cosines, which means everything gets a negative. Everything's negative. And then in quadrant 4, only the cosine's positive, which are the x's, so all the y's are going to get negatives. And that is how you fill out your unit circle.